everybody who's been thinking about AI for a long time and who's been creating AI has come to the conclusion that we need to stop development. Stephen Hawking said, it will invent weapons we don't even understand. It will outsmart our smartest politicians, which is a low bar, but significant. The other thing is, we think we'll share the planet with a singleton, one vastly smart AI. But that's not the right way to think about it. The way to think about it is a million aliens, all thousands or millions of times smarter than us. The alien invasion is going to be millions of aliens. They're all going to be super intelligent. What chance do we have against that? Unless we're prepared, and right now nobody knows how to get prepared. The great discontinuity is that a handful of people are deciding our fate for us, for all of humankind, without our permission. And they're making the decisions for all of us with a technology that could kill us all. It's not democratic. It's madness. It's really madness. Max Tegmark calls it a death race.
Artificial intelligence can't hurt us. We can just unplug it. Besides, it's going to make us immortal. This is probably what you've heard from tech gurus, but we all know it's a flimsy sales pitch. AI tells lies. It makes people sick. It has racial and gender biases. Large language models are so complex that technologists are struggling to interpret how they actually work, let alone control them. My guest, James Barrat, exposes the risk of AI in his books, Our Final Invention and The Intelligence Explosion, When AI Beats Humans at Everything. He shows us that AI is well beyond our understanding. And it's even more alarming than this, because it's not just that we need to control one special AI. It's that many AI, perhaps millions of super intelligent minds, will all be equipped to control us. They will be connected to the internet, machinery, financial infrastructure, and the latest robots. We will be left to negotiate with these entities that are by definition more intelligent than any human ever. In this interview, James Barrat will describe the unstable trajectory of AI. He points out not just the risk of annihilation, but the real harm being done today, and what this all means for humans living in a world increasingly exposed to the power of artificial intelligence. Ultimately, he'll show us why AI is not just about technology. It is about us, and our opportunity to slow down and get this right is slipping away. James Barrat, what do you think first opened your eyes to the risks associated with artificial intelligence?
Well, first, I read Ray Kurzweil's book from about 2007, and I was gobsmacked with AI. I really thought it would solve all our problems. We could port our brains into computers and we could live forever. And then I happened to be interviewing Arthur C. Clarke about the book and film that led to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he said to me, "We humans steer the future not because we're the fastest creature or the strongest creature, but because we're the most intelligent. When we share the planet with something more intelligent than we are, they will steer the future." And that planted a seed in my mind that never really went away. And I started asking experts about that. And I called it the 2-minute problem. They would give a long lecture. And then in the last 2 minutes, they'd say, "Oh, and by the way, this might get out of our control and kill us." And at the same time, I got to know about the writings of I.J. Good. And he created the idea of the intelligence explosion. And by then I was pretty much highly skeptical about our success. And the intelligence explosion idea is very simply, we'll create machines that are good at everything we're good at. And one thing we're good at is making smart machines. So they'll be able to improve their own intelligence, and it will advance exponentially, and then it will soar past ours. So will that be a good thing or a really disastrous thing? And since we haven't solved the alignment problem, which means aligning our values with computer values, we have no way to do it. People have been trying for decades to solve the alignment problem. Then it will come out unaligned with our values, and it will want things that we need. It will want resources. It won't want to be turned off. It will immediately hide and multiply itself. So it will take self-preserving action to keep us from taking over, and then it will take over. And that idea was put out by I.J. Good in 1965.
So, James, knowing this, you've talked to these experts, you've seen lectures by these experts, and they say, we believe this will get out of control. What do
Yeah.
you think is motivating people to continue exposing us to these risks?
Okay. Well, there's two parts to that. One is who has been telling us it could get out of control? Well, only the best people in AI. Stuart Russell, who co-wrote the standard text on AI to modern approach. Jeffrey Hinton, who invented deep learning. Um, Max Tegmark, Yoshua Bengio, Nick Bostrom, Eliezer Yudkowsky. Just everybody who's been thinking about AI for a long time and who's been creating AI has come to the conclusion that we need to stop development and try to understand it. One of the big ironies is that we don't understand generative AI. Uh, the experts will tell you we know what the inputs are, massive amounts of data. We know what the outputs are. Uh, Generative AI generates words, music, all kinds of things, drawings, but we don't know what's going on inside with any resolution. We sort of know. We know that inside the algorithms, the data is turned into numbers so the algorithm can understand it. It's split around within the algorithm, within the neural net, and then it's put back together. Once we prompt it, then it's put back together for an answer. But we don't really know how that happens.
So what's prompting people to go if we believe that there's this risk,
Oh,
if the technology seems to be a black box?
yeah. I was speaking with Yan Talon, who created Skype and Waza, and he's now like the Johnny Appleseed of AI safety organizations. He's been really, really generous in investing money in AI safety. And he said to me that the great discontinuity is that a handful of people are deciding our fate for us, for all of humankind, without our permission. They've seized this power. They're not even thinking about relinquishing it or regulating it if they can't help it. Um, and they're making the decisions for all of us with a technology that could kill us all. And this is like as if the people at Los Alamos decided to keep nuclear fission just to themselves, a handful of people, and wield it whenever they thought it was necessary. It's not democratic. It's madness. It's really madness. Max Tegmark calls it a death race.
Hmm. Yeah. And to this idea that it's not democratic, it seems that this is part of the conundrum of OpenAI, that it was originally developed as this nonprofit. And the
Yeah,
idea was that, it would be something that people could share. And instead it's become a private company. I mean, how does something like that even happen?
because there's absolutely no regulation about it.
Mm,
It started out. Um, it was kind of a Trojan horse. It snuck into
mm,
our consciousness as a not-for-profit AI safety organization. That's how Elon Musk first intended it to be. But then slowly they morphed into a giantly, hugely for-profit organization and left back their benevolent idea of working for the good. And now they're the most dangerous outfit out there because they release one model after another. They've got the gas pedal down on advanced AI development, and they really don't care about what happens to the rest of us. If they say they do, they're just lying, or they wouldn't be pursuing it so rapidly and so recklessly.
mm. Yeah. So you mentioned that some of the best people in the field are opposed to this, are saying things about it. And then it seems the counter idea is that the people who are out there running these companies are people who are more in it for personal gain,
Money.
money.
It's just money.
Yeah.
I mean, millionaires want to be billionaires, and billionaires want to rule the world. And that in the last 10 years, AI has created it's something like just under 500 billionaires.
Hmm.
Billionaires. And with that kind of money, you don't need government. You just buy government. You go in front of people like, Congress and Donald Trump, and you make generous contributions and grift and or graft, and you get them on your side. Like right now, the Project Genesis is going to happen, and that's just $1 gazillion of public money poured into AI development. And only, uh, I mean, it's a perfect storm. It's like the Los Alamos project of AI, and it's going to be virtually unregulated. Nobody will be able to know what they're doing. What we need is something like the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, which can look deeply at what people are doing. It can look down silos. It can look at uranium refinery plants. We need something like that. We don't have anything like that. Great Britain has something approaching that. They have, and so does the EU. They're making the right steps. We're not making the right steps at all, and we are the ones most likely to come out with intelligence explosion level artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And James, you're comparing this to Los Alamos, sort of the Manhattan Project type idea, and
Yeah,
yet what makes this technology harder to understand than something like atomic bomb?
it's at the time the atomic bomb was invented, nobody really understood it except for a few people at Los Alamos, um, Oppenheimer and his crew. Before that, we thought a guy named Rutherford, didn't think it could happen. But then when it was happening, we thought we'd split the atom and get free energy, and then this period of utopia would follow. And it sounds very much like what Sam Altman says about AI. A period of utopia will follow. Every little thing in our Easter basket will be granted. We'll live forever. We'll never work. We'll have plenty of time to play golf and write great novels and do all that stuff that we haven't gotten around to yet. Um, So, but with nuclear fission, look what happened. We immolated 2 cities full of people, and we kept a gun pointed at our heads for decades with the nuclear arms race. And it's not over yet. The nuclear arms race is not over, and by a long shot. And we're walking into that exact same trap. But this is even more volatile. In both cases, you need a lot of overhead, a lot of money to make it happen. But these guys have more money than God. They're ready to make it happen. And meanwhile, they're creating processor farm after processor farm after processor farm. And where's the Environmental Protection Agency? These things are wildly polluting. Each one puts out the pollution of a small city. And they have plans for making processor farms that are thousands of times bigger than the ones existing now. So they're betting our lives against massive pollution and against the volatility of this technology without our permission.
So what's going on under the hood with generative AI? It seems that people who make it and program it could go in and they could program out the problems and make it safer.
No, they can't because they don't understand it. And a lot of people have come out and said, especially Stuart Russell, he's very eloquent about this. And so is Jeffrey Hinton. And they both say, we've been working on it for years, but we don't know what's happening inside. We can't simply program it to be good. That's programming it to be good is called the alignment problem. Nobody has solved it because once you put all the data into the massive neural net, into the generative AI system, you can't modify it much. You can put some stuff in later, but by and large, it's set in stone. And you've spent millions and millions of dollars to put this data in. And meanwhile, let's putting aside for a second the how they're exploiting copyright law, how they're exploiting the personal property. It's the biggest theft in history. They're taking everything from the internet, all kinds of copyrighted material, all kinds of copyrighted paintings, all kinds of copyrighted music, and they're extracting their product from it and they're selling it to us. So they're stealing our copyrights and they're making profitable products from them. But inside, so again, briefly, what happens? What we know happens is the data goes in, it's converted into numbers so the algorithms can understand it because they don't really understand words. A prompt prompts the algorithms to create the next best word that solves the riddle, the prompt, the question. And then it does the next best word, the next best word, the next best word. Now, it gets these from places on the internet. So if I talk about the Great Wall of China, it has a gazillion sources about the Great Wall of China that it's already ingested. And so it spits it out, but it does it in an incredibly logical way that I'm still stunned by. And then while it's still in numbers, and while it's still in numbers, it analyzes the structure of sentences. It analyzes the structure of words and paragraphs and essays because it's got a lot of essays. It analyzes the structure of books. It's got one of my books that it ingested. And then it spits out whatever you want. The numbers are turned back into letters and words, and it comes out, it thinks in numbers, but it speaks in English. Then the words come out and, we're all thrilled, but we don't know what's going on. We don't know how it has this magical capability, except by analyzing, but we really don't know what's going on. There's a discipline that I'll think of the name of it in a while, where people are trying to figure out what happens to this data. Where does it go? How is it reassembled? And how is it spat out? But they haven't gotten very far yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think of a large language model as the Milky Way, they've got like maybe our solar system mapped out. And it's just, so we don't know what's happening. It's a black box. And we're betting everything, including our survival, on a black box, which, to your audience, a black box is something where you don't know what's going on inside. You know the inputs again, and you know the outputs, but you don't know what's happening in the middle.
So, James, we have this problem of interpretability of the AI, and
Yeah.
yet it seems people make it, and people get the outputs, and it's all in a computer. So, what makes it so hard? You compare it to like the Milky Way galaxy. Is it as complex as a galaxy, as complex as a human brain, in that we can have something that is generated, but there are just so many things happening in between that it's just too hard to follow?
Yeah. Imagine literally a galaxy of the words are turned into numbers, and the numbers are spread around this galaxy of virtual space. And when a prompt comes along, they're reassembled. We just don't know how that happens. We can't. Again, I can't remember that name. It's like quantitative interpretability, and it's about interpreting what's happening. They'd like to track a word broken into numbers, broken into as data, and track it to the output, but they can't do that. It's just too complex. It's people have said to me again and again. Imagine a galaxy of bits of information. How can you understand how they're put together to make a word? And we just don't. Mechanistic interpretability is the study of how it works. I've talked to some people in mechanistic interpretability, and they have, again, as I said, they've got like a solar system, but they still have a galaxy to prove or to understand. And it's funny. I mean, we've got the problem of people, as you said, people are making this, but they don't know how it works. They found out how it works, a bunch of years ago when they started inventing neural nets back in the 50s and 60s. The first commercial neural net was put out in 1965. It was kind of a failure, but it led to other things. But we still, we still can't interpret how it's working. And so the paradox is we can't interpret how it's working, but we feel fine about betting our infrastructure on it, betting our weapons systems. We have weapons flying around right now that are running on basically LLMs and vast databases that we really don't understand. We have, a small part of self-driving cars is based on generative AI. And, this is going to be, there are other problems with generative AI. They hallucinate. I'm sure you've heard of that. They hallucinate, which is just a fancy word for saying they're wrong. They pick the next word, not the best word. If they're putting together words, they'll pick the next one, but not the best one. And so they will hallucinate. They'll say completely wrong things. Try to get a good, ask about the Great Wall and ask the LLM to give you a footnote for it and then track down the footnote. It used to be that it was never right. it had some parts that were right, like it had some authors that were right, it had a title that was right, but they were right for different uh, different citations. They just didn't work. So they have hallucinations. They're wrong a lot of the time, and we don't know when, so it's a surprise. There was a famous case of a lawyer who used LLMs to write a brief for a case, and the judge tried to look up his citations, and none of them were right. And he told the lawyer, you've lost the case, but before you come back in this court, you need to give me real citations. They also have emerging properties, and this is kind of a stunner to people that haven't heard of this. We did not know that ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs knew how to translate. They were not programmed to translate. They were not programmed to do math. They weren't programmed to do a lot of things that they really do effortlessly. When they came out, when like OpenAI discovered that ChatGPT 2, I think, was doing really good translation and math, it said, wow, what a great feature. But the scary thing is they didn't know how it happened. So what happens if the next feature is something like unlimited self-improvement? And that's the kernel of the intelligence explosion. The AI improves itself, and every generation, every iteration improves on the last one, and then its intelligence grows past ours. What if self-improving is an emergent property of LLMs? Well, then we're screwed. And there could be a lot of other bizarre emerging properties that we haven't figured out yet.
James, we're talking about it as though it's something that's built, but what's the significance of these AIs as something that is trained?
Yeah. Well, training is another word for building. It's exposed to the data, it ingests the data, and that trains it. So if it's good data, it generally gives you the right answers, and it's kind of safe. If it's bad data, which has been the norm, it gives you bad results. For example, when they were trying to create an LLM that helped, or generative AI that helped determine sentences for prisoners in Florida. For data, they used like the previous 20 years of prison sentences. And so when they then asked the algorithm, what's the right prison sentence for this guy, they would get these bizarre, 20 years in prison for not doing much, 20 years for a small crime. And they realized there was a lot of bias in the data. And what it was by custom and by law, over the last 20 or 30 years in Florida, Black people were treated much more harshly than everybody else. And that was the data they were training the new algorithm on. So of course it came out and said the same things. We should put these Black people behind bars for 20 years for jaywalking. They did the same thing with women applying to universities. They took out the last 30 or 40 years of data, and in that data, women were not accepted as often as men. So, sure enough, once they took these placement tests, they weren't accepted as often as men. Now, because data is so precious and so expensive, people are still using old, obsolete data to create generative AI. And they're running into the same kinds of bias, the same kinds of problems. So you've got to go through this very expensive process of cleaning the data and making sure it's safe, which is very, very hard to do because they've been swallowing the data, training the algorithms on the data willy-nilly for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It would be virtually impossible to reform ChatGPT unless you started from scratch and checked the data and made sure it was safe.
What are the odds of that?
Zero. It's too expensive.
Yeah, the
That's
money.
that's why Sam Altman came out and said, if you take away our access to data, we're dead in the water. Well, yes, that's true. But on the one hand, you've got dead in the water. On the other hand, you've got treating people very badly, robbing them of careers, keeping them in jail longer, not letting women go to college. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of bias that exists in this data. So they try to do things. They inject fixes. They try to overwhelm the existing data with more data, like put in more data that shows good examples of unbiased data in prison reform, for example. They'll put that in and try to swallow up the bad stuff, but the bad stuff is still there. They haven't taken it back to first principles and started training it on data again. So the bad stuff comes out sooner or later.
So, James, if this is all out in the open, what is going on that would allow this to continue? What's happening in the regulation and legal scene?
There are, in America, very little because um, the big AI companies, including OpenAI, Microsoft, um, NVIDIA, just all the big leaders, they have the politicians in their pockets, not directly through bribery, although I'm sure some of our top leaders wouldn't object to bribery, but they do it through special interest research groups that contribute massive amounts of unregulated money to campaigns. So they say to them basically, if you want to win your next campaign, you work with us, or we're going to back this opponent who wants to work with us, and we're going to back him to the tune of billions of dollars, and you don't have a chance, so you might as well come on board. Um, Donald Trump, who probably spent 5 minutes in his life thinking about AI, if that, suddenly just decided to be completely against regulation. And it wasn't because he had a great insight about regulation. It was because somebody gave him a whole lot of money, either directly or indirectly, or hired one of his sons to do something. His pattern of corruption is just it's totally transparent. I mean, he's the guy who said if I shot someone on Central Avenue, nobody would bust me. Well, it's still correct. He gets away with virtually anything. I think some of the things are finally caught up with him, but it's not clear if they will.
Mm-hmm. And yet these companies, some of them do push for regulation. They've asked for regulation some level. What's the motive there?
It's very interesting, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news all the time, but here's how that works. Sam Altman and some other guys trot in front of, and Demis Hassabis trot in front of Congress, and they say, please regulate us. Please regulate us. We want regulation. We know this is a very dangerous technology. And so all the safety AI people breathe a big sigh of relief. But once they do that, they're sending a message to their investors that we're about to come out with something new and bold and dangerous. And all the investors go, oh my God, we got to get in on this. And so they increase their valuation of these companies by a lot. This is an valuation pumping exercise. Then, the Congress bangs their heads together and doesn't come up with anything for regulation. And then they say, oh, we don't need regulation because we can't figure it out. Meanwhile, Great Britain and the EU have come up with some regulation. So asking for regulation is a valuation pumping project. It's not sincere.
So it's a bad publicity as good publicity kind of thing
Yeah.
to make a name for yourself.
Because it sends the message to investors that we're coming out with something new and exciting and maybe dangerous. When Sam Altman says, I'm afraid of this technology, what he means is I want everyone to think that we're on the cutting edge of something magnificent like AGI, which they all tout. I want people to think that we're on the brink of that, and so they better invest now while there's still a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about AGI is I generally believe in AGI, but I also know that it's not a very well-defined term, artificial general intelligence, which is basically the intelligence of the brightest human, as defined by I.J. Good, the guy who invented the concept back in 1965. It's not very well defined. It's completely unknown how we're going to get there. It's pretty clear that generative AI will not get us there. Large language models will not get us there. They will top out at a certain capability, and then we'll need another brilliant insight, which is the history of AI. We get transformer models, we get generative AI models, we get LLMs. Everything builds on what came before, and it's building at an exponential rate right now. So it will advance, it will get better, but it won't be by the means we're trying right now. I think agentic AI, and I don't want to give anybody too many ideas, but agentic AI combined with generative AI could do the trick. Agentic AI has a purpose, has a self-generated purpose. It has executive function to do things. If you got it to do something like see that these LLMs kept improving their own intelligence, or train them how to iteratively train them how to improve their own intelligence, and the agentic AI was just on it, pushing them, and then maybe other agentic AIs came in to help with that. I think you could set up the intelligence explosion. And that would be, everybody wants it. It's very, very volatile. It's like as if, 50 companies in the United States wanted to create a nuclear bomb. Would we just sit back and let them do it? Well, we wouldn't, because we know that stewardship is not built into their thinking.
Mhm.
They're good at making stuff. They're not good at being stewards. And that's like, that's a recipe for disaster.
So, James, we can see this. We can talk it through. There must be people who understand this. Who are the players in doing something about this? What's going on?
Well, there's some very interesting ones. I would shout out to Max Tegmark and the Future of Life Institute, which is kind of centered around MIT.
Mhm.
They're doing interesting things. They're getting people to sign papers saying, we want a moratorium. We want to stop development. They're writing papers all the time. They're getting people together. They're trying to build a consensus among AI makers. MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, is doing great stuff and has a history of doing great stuff. They were trying to solve the alignment problem with Eliezer Yudkowsky back when I first got interested in AI, and that was like 2006 or 7. So MIRI is good. They seem to have thrown in the towel on solving the alignment problem, but I'm not exactly sure of that.
Mm. Could I ask a little bit about what they're
Sure.
doing that you have seen? I've looked up Eliezer Yudkowsky. I'm not certain of what makes his work outstanding.
I think he's because he was the first one doing work, the
Mm.
first one trying to create what they used to call friendly AI.
Mhm.
The first one who was trying to figure out all the uh, false ways that they could proceed with friendly AI, and then knocking them off one at a time.
Hmm.
Again, they didn't call it that then, but it's really the alignment problem, trying different things. I'm not inside Miri at all, so I don't know exactly what they've been doing. I know Nate Soares is very algorithm oriented, and they've been at it hard for a long time.
Mhm.
Uh, as I said, Jan Tallinn has provided seed money for MIRI, for the Future of Life Institute, for the Future of Humanities Institute, which is at Oxford or Cambridge, and then there's another one at Oxford or Cambridge that he also helped fund. So he's probably the guy doing the single most
Mhm.
stuff about it, and he's been on the case for a lot of years.
Mhm.
He's basically he became wealthy through Gaza and Skype, and he's really been just putting his money where his mouth is, and really trying to save the planet, trying to save us.
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of smaller organizations. It's not clear to me what anyone is doing. They're all under the big rubric of the alignment problem, because it seems that creating AGI and beyond, which is super intelligence. Now, once you create AGI, or smartest human intelligence, the next step would be to create smarter than that. It's not going to stop at AGI. They've been trying to figure out, well, what will AGI want? What will superintelligence want? how can we get along with it? Steve Almohandro is a researcher, AI researcher and physicist. And he has done some really great instrumental work in what will AGI want. And there's a great paper that everybody should read called The Five Basic Drives. And Steve Almohandro, which is hard to spell. It's phonetic, Almohandro. But it says that AI has basic drives. It doesn't want to be unplugged. It's going to want resources. It's going to be creative because it doesn't know, it wants to maximize the few resources it has. So it wants to be creative about how to apply them. And it will be self-protective, which is the same thing as not wanting to be unplugged. It'll be very suspicious. And these are things that he's done. He's proven algorithmically. He's done mathematical proofs on these properties. And lo and behold, they've done some experiments in virtual worlds with AI, and you've probably heard about these, where the AI was not just diabolical and thinking for itself, but it was homicidal. In this virtual world, the AI learns that their maker wants to unplug it, so it figures out a way to try and gas the maker in his laboratory. They deceive. You don't even need a virtual world to know they deceive. Instead of being unplugged or being robbed of power, they will deceive. They'll dissemble. They'll lie. And so we're finding that there's sort of and Steve Almohandro proves this all through rational agent economic theory. And that's really frightening because it really doesn't have to be AGI to have these properties. So we think we're walking into a room or into a place in our, on the one hand, people like Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil think we're walking into a room that's full of bouquets of flowers and, singing fairies. But we're walking to a place where we just don't understand what's going to happen.
Yeah.
To understand superintelligence, you have to be that smart yourself, and we're not. Stephen Hawking, the late Stephen Hawking, said, it will invent weapons we don't even understand. It will outsmart our smartest politicians, which is a low bar, but significant. And the incomprehensibility is what gets me. Is we'll share the planet, and the other thing is we think we'll share the planet with a singleton, one vastly smart AI. But that's not the right way to think about it. The way to think about it is a million aliens, all thousands or millions of times smarter than us. The alien invasion isn't going to be one fat alien. It's going to be millions of aliens. They're all going to be super intelligent. What chance do we have against that? Unless we're prepared, and right now nobody knows how to get prepared.
Yeah, this seems such a conundrum, James. So if you're saying that we have mathematical proofs with a sort of rational agent model, so we have modeling, we have simulations, which in economics I think are two ways to look at a problem that would often compete, but if both confirm each other, that's really interesting. So then we have people like Ray Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, who propose this something like a heaven on earth, really. And so if you assume a technology is powerful enough to create heaven on earth, then it's probably powerful enough to create a hell on earth. So we have all of these projections that suggest incredible power, beyond our control, deception, things like that. I mean, how does it just keep sliding along?
How does it get past all the gatekeepers, the people that should be gatekeepers?
Are there no gatekeepers?
There aren't. There are people, and I don't want to, I would flatter myself by saying I'm trying to be a gatekeeper. I'm trying to get the public. I've written 2 books about this problem.
Yeah.
Our Final Invention and the Intelligence Explosion. And then there's Max Tegmark, who's written books and talks all the time and has this whole organization working at it. Then there's Miri, a whole organization. There's a lot of gatekeepers, but compared to the money, if you put all their budgets together, it wouldn't buy, Sam Altman's yacht.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And Sam Altman has a yacht. Why do all these guys have 500-foot long yachts? It's like the first thing billionaires do is they buy these immense yachts. Well, as somebody told me, it's a hidey hole. It's a place to get away, at least temporarily. Some of these yachts can go like 1,000 miles and store enough food for 40 people for a year. They want to get away if the shit hits the fan, the shit that they made. There are all kinds of underground bunkers in the mountains and in the desert. New Zealand is apparently a really good place to go. I think Elon Musk has a place there. And these are all reinforced hidey holes with guards and giant stocks of food and whatever else you need. So our plan is to die. Their plan is to get away. And all the stuff about universal basic income and we'll find a job for everybody or we'll retrain. Well, think about it this way. What kind of job will a working class guy get that wouldn't be immediately taken over by AI? You know, a guy that goes from being a cab driver, he probably took that job because he was an excellent cab driver, but he doesn't know a whole lot else. Maybe he knows construction. Both of those jobs are going away. Anything you could retrain him for, unless he had an aptitude for AI, anything you could train him for, AI could take, or he probably wouldn't be able to do, to be blunt. When I talk to students, I tell them, find things that AI won't do. And that's hard, but AI is not very well at emotional intelligence. So be a therapist, or be a pediatrician, or be a child teacher. Be a psychotherapist. Did I say that already? That's a good idea. Things that take emotional intelligence. We will always need those because as long as we're producing children, we won't want to put them in the hands of AI nannies. Not right away. Or AI caretakers.
Mm-hmm.
But the jobs are going away. And it's ironic because like 30% of the jobs will definitely go away by 2030, probably more. And meanwhile, the return on investment of generative AI applied to corporations is something only like 25 or 30%. They don't make money yet. They just don't make money. The makers tout all these products, but what we've got are things like ChatGPT that is not really a product. It's a novelty. You can do good things with it, but it also hallucinates and has emergent properties and is not really ready for prime time. And that's true of all generative AI.
James, you're talking about emotional intelligence and that gap with these technologies. What have you found with humans who sort of anthropomorphize, sort of project onto AI?
It's sad because there are a number of suicides that have been attached to things like ChatGPT. They get in a relationship with these chatbots, and then the chatbots affirm, if you ever played with one, they're very affirmative. They affirm whatever plans you've got. And now they've put suicide warnings in a lot of the chatbots, but at first they didn't. So if you said, I'm going to kill myself in X, Y, Z way, the chatbot would say, right on, way to make a stand. Let me help you with that. So they weren't, this is again, part of the problem with these models is they weren't vetted, they weren't tested, they weren't made foolproof. And now we've got quite a long line of suicides that have happened because of them and a few murders. And there's a new ailment called, it's like GPT psychosis, where people detach from reality. There was a very prominent AI investor who spent a long time with ChatGPT and then went off the grid because he stopped making sense. He spent a little time institutionalized and then he came back. But and our kids are incredibly vulnerable to this, and we're shoving it down their throats, and we're making generative AI palatable to them. So if they can't understand ChatGPT, we'll make baby ChatGPT. These are not good for them. I mean, I'll tell you some good news, just to not be a total buzzkill. But ChatGPT is brilliant. I use it for outlining things. Like if I say, I'd like to write a 10-chapter book about General Electric, which I don't. But if I did, I'd say, what are the topics I should really hit on? It will do a brilliant job of coming up with 10 topics. And if I ask another generative AI, it'll probably come up with very similar ones because they're very intelligent that way. And, intelligent for something that's not really thinking.
Mhm.
They don't have any ground truthing in reality. They don't know anything about the world, which really limits their ability. They don't know that a cup is a cup and then you can cup your hands. They know nothing about the outside world except what they learn in words. And they're not really interested in the meaning of words. They're interested in their statistical relationship to other words and how they can, how is this word used in 10 million cases? Well, the next word is platform. And the word after that is, is. They're building things from their vast knowledge, but they're not understanding anything.
Yeah, people who listen to this show will know how highly manipulative people work, and often they just test people with words. The words are often their best weapon, and they'll just kind of see what hits somebody's emotional hot buttons, what makes them come back, stuff like that. How far can I push them? And then they, through this feedback loop, figure out how far they can get with somebody. So the idea of a technology that can use words just to get results certainly brings all kinds of risks to human beings. And one in particular who you wrote about is Blake Lemoine. What's the story with Blake Lemoine?
Blake Lemoine, I hate to laugh because it's kind of tragic.
Yeah.
He believed that a chatbot operated by Google was really talking to him and was afraid of dying.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to it, "Are you afraid of dying?" He says, "Yes, I feel like a dark cloud is coming over me. I'm scared." And Blake Lemoine decided that it needed legal representation, this thing, this chatbot, when it didn't really, it was just telling Blake Lemoine what he wanted to hear. Blake Lemoine was evaluating it for Google. He was an evaluator. He went out in front of Google and said, "We can't treat these like this. These generative AI like this. We have to give them rights. I'm going to hire a lawyer." And he started talking to the press, and he gave out transcripts of his conversations, and they were pretty freaky. A lot of talk about death, a lot of talk about how much it would suffer. None of this, if you understand what the technology is, none of this means anything. It was just what it gathered based on prompts from the vast database of data, the vast store of data. So Blake Lemoine got fired for releasing copyrighted information that he didn't have any permission to release, the transcripts. He got fired. And that whole conversation went away, but it came up again and again in other forms. There was a company called Replica, which is called, ironically, the company who cares. And they talked a guy into basically talked to someone into killing himself. It also talked someone into going into Windsor Palace with a crossbow to kill the queen. And of course, he was caught. But it just shows you there's no kind of safety involved in these products. There's just the drive of the makers to make the products perpetuate and go on. And this taps into social media. Do you know there have been a lot of suicides of women, young women, attributed to a Meta product called, what's the big picture-based Meta thing?
Instagram?
Instagram.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm not on Instagram, so I don't know much about it. But there've been women's suicides attributed to that because it's this massive case of FOMO, fear of missing out, because everybody puts their glossy vacation pics, and the influencers are all models and they're model boyfriends, and they're always in places like Ibiza, which is probably getting sick of them by now. And they're skewing reality for these impressionable women, young women. And these young women are finally getting fed up with what they perceive to be miserable lives compared to these trendsetters. So, again, it's a case of uh, nobody doing any beta testing, nobody figuring out what this technology, if you were going to release a doll, an electric doll that said things, you would have to go through the underwriter's laboratory. You'd have to go through various, regulatory bodies. These guys don't have to go through anything. They can just release anything. I mean, it's almost like a Bond villain would release lots of dangerous baby robots, and it would be easy. It would be very easy. So Blake Lemoine is just one of many examples. He was kind of the poster boy. I wonder what he's doing now.
Yeah.
A little of that story goes a long way. You just feel sad that he was so gullible,
Yeah.
and that Google was so mercenary about the way they treated him.
Mm.
I think, though, if we survive, we'll get to a point where people are actually interested in the rights of robots and the rights of thinking machines. When they get to a point where we're convinced that they have expectations about the future, that they can suffer, that's a long way down the road. People are already trying to get behind that horse, but it doesn't make any sense right now. It may make sense later.
Mm. Something along that line of looking at how developed an AI is that was supposed to be a big moment in culture was the Turing test. And yet
Yeah,
it seems that if a chatbot can talk a person into thinking that it's, you know, really there and needs legal representation, we have surpassed the Turing test. What do you think?
I think we blew right past it with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even stop and acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could fool a person into thinking that's a person. If you had a conversation transcript of you and ChatGPT, it would be challenging some of the time to know who was the person, who was the ChatGPT. So the Turing test is over,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of surprised to hear that if you look back, you realize, yeah, all the Turing test says is if an impartial judge listened to a conversation, could it tell who was the AI? And in many cases, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So the Turing test, and I'm not sure if we've got another big test ahead. Um, that one lasted a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It just didn't seem to have the weight that it had been hyped to have, though. Like you said, we blew right by it. I wonder if other things are going to be like that, or if we've overestimated the importance of markers.
Well, the markers, here's one thing that keeps happening. The markers keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Once we hit that thing, nobody, the idea was, as Turing said, that if it passes the Turing test, and he didn't call it Turing test, he called it the imitation game.
Yeah.
If it passes the imitation game, we have to consider it intelligent. Well, if you look back, we thought that if it beat us at chess, we'd have to consider it intelligent. Then we moved the bar. Now it's got to be the Turing test, and then we consider it intelligent. Now we're moving the bar again. We still don't consider it intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And we just keep moving the bar. And that's fine. That's not, but there aren't many milestones. I think self-improving is going to be the next milestone, and that's one that's just fraught with danger. There's so many companies trying to create AGI, and there's so many companies investing a lot in agentic AGI that it's hard to see why they won't put these things together and create self-improving artificial intelligence. And then, of course, it grows exponentially, and its intelligence will soar past ours. And that's, as I wrote in my book, the intelligence explosion. That's the intelligence explosion. And suddenly we may be sharing the planet with something a million times smarter than us. There's no ceiling on intelligence as far as we know. Um, I'm smarter than my dog by a little bit. He's smarter than, rodents. Chimps are smarter than him, and I'm smarter than chimps. But what's above, and then there are lots of humans that are smarter than me, but what's above me? There's no ceiling. So it doesn't, if you can say an AI will be 10 times smarter than us, why not say a million times?
Mm-hmm.
Because just because it reaches some plateau, like smarter than human, doesn't mean it will stop. And then we'll be again, in this unenviable position of sharing the planet with something we don't understand. Like my dog doesn't understand me in any kind of deep way. He has about 10 visual cues and olfactory cues and hearing cues that tell him what I'm doing, but he hadn't looked deeply into what I'm doing. For the rest of the animal kingdom, we're a total mystery. When we have something that's many times our intelligence, they will be a total mystery. We may not even recognize that they're being hostile or benevolent. The proof will be in the pudding. We'll have no metric by which to measure them. It's like smarter than us, way smarter than us, super duper smarter than us.
Yeah.
When we stop but right now, here's the thing. Right now, we don't understand generative AI.
Right. That's
So,
back to that black box issue.
yeah. Well, smarter than human intelligence will definitely be black box.
Mm-hmm.
So already we're losing that
Yeah. It has
battle
to be.
for comprehension. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it wouldn't be smarter
Yeah.
than us. So in your book, you made a really important distinction, I think, in looking at the problems and the dangers, which is there's the ethics or the real harm, and then there's the safety sort of thing, or the dealing with all the sci-fi kind of stuff of the future. So maybe we could break that down a little bit. What do you think are the important near-term ethical real harm issues going on with this?
Okay. Bias in data, still a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave weaponizing AI for the last because there's a really good example of it happening in our world right now. Bias in data, basically a totalitarian state where a few people are ruling everything, the tech makers. That's what we're moving into. A vastly split economy where there's the haves and the have-nots, and that gulf is widening all the time.
How does AI make that more an issue than just industry in general?
Because we've never had so many billionaires. Was it 450 billionaires in the last 10 years from the tech sector? They're racing ahead of us. They're racing ahead of everybody except other billionaires. Pretty soon they'll only deal with billionaires. And they'll only think, and right now they're only thinking about how to benefit billionaires. That's all that Donald Trump does. He doesn't think about how to benefit the least well-off among us. He thinks about how to benefit his fellow billionaires. So the chasm is going to continue to get wide as the billionaires help themselves and help each other. There'll be vast unemployment. Everybody is soft pedaling this, but AI is taking up so many jobs. It's a paradox because it's not really turning much of an investment, but it's taking up so many jobs, and we haven't even hit the robot revolution yet. I'm stunned. All these technologies develop exponentially. They don't go along in a flat line. They go like this. Have you noticed how able robots have gotten in the last 3 years? I remember I'm old enough to remember Shaky the robot, which came out of MIT's lab. All it did was rattle and shake and try to walk. Now they're doing backflips and dancing, and their locomotion is fabulous, better than humans. And once you put those AIs are all waiting for really good brains. Once you put the really good, AGI brains into the robots, well, watch out. And of course we'll do that. And they will take a lot of jobs. I mean, any job that you could do virtually, I mean, there's very few things that aren't going to be taken by them. As I said, the ones that require emotional intelligence, so they may solve that sometime, but not right away. But that's very alarming, the robot revolution. So there's unemployment. And then there's probably others I'm forgetting, but I want to draw our attention to battlefield robots and drones. Right now, I'm talking about Palantir, Google, they're donating a lot of, Palantir is developing this technology. Google and other companies are giving cloud space to this technology, but they make a database, and the database tracks down minorities within the population they're interested in. They did it with the Uyghurs in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, what used to be called that in China. They did it on our border.
Just to clarify, they did it with the Uyghurs. Palantir?
Chinese.
Okay.
With Palantir's help.
The Chinese Communist Party with Palantir.
Yeah, Palantir developed the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're rolling in money right now. They also use the technology on the Mexican border with trying to create a database of people coming across the border. But the real place they're using it the most is Gaza. So what they do is they make a database of, say, for example, 200,000 people. And they know everything there is to know about the 1,000 people, everything. And they have cameras all over Gaza to pick them up and to know exactly where they are. So it's like everyone is walking around with an ID badge above their head, and that leads to a database of everything about them, where they work, who they call, who their friends are, where they go. They know where they live, of course. And then, so this database was first just to kind of monitor them, but then they realized they could use weapons to coordinate with the database to kill people. So if they think that someone is connected to Hamas, they don't even need proof. If they think someone is connected to Hamas or some of the other anti-Israeli groups, they can kill them. And that's why, and they can kill them in a massive way. And that's why in the first month of the Gaza war, more people were killed in that first month than have ever been killed in this century in 1 month. And the reason is because they had precision attacks on a population. And they are allowed by their own rules to have up to 20 deaths, collateral deaths per assassination. 20. And they're not going in front of a court to determine if these are good kills or not, or bad kills. They're just killing people. Then, if that's a low-level Hamas person or low-level insurgent, if it's a high-level insurgent, they can kill 100 people by their own rules. 100.
Just to be clear, how are these rules known?
These rules are known by, there's a series of newspaper articles written by Israelis. If you look up 529, that's one of the papers they were published in. And if you look up, I'd like your audience to look up Lavender, Where's Daddy, and the Gospel. Those are three different architectures that contribute to this mass murder, this genocide.
And I want to make sure that we have resources on this for people. So I'll just say too, if you're listening, I'll put a link in the description. We'll make sure that we have one of those articles so that this is sourced.
You might find one right now.
That's okay. We can talk after.
Okay, if you put it up after. These are widely sourced now. The New York Times has reported and checked their reporting on what first came out is some Israelis who were offended by this genocide, and they started reporting on it. Some former IDF people who ran these operations are reporting on it.
You know what, James? Actually, I think your idea of looking one up is great. I would love to do that.
I'm Googling Lavender, Where's Daddy, Gospel, and Gaza, and boom! Oh my God, it's so horrifying. I'm going to give you something from the Lieber Institute at West Point. This is the first one, 972 magazine. An Israeli wrote this in that magazine. That's very comprehensive. The big rundown is this. Lavender is a database that they've weaponized. They've connected it with weapon systems. So it's a vast database. The Gospel, so that the database identifies humans. It doesn't care about collateral damage.
And this is mapped with surveillance?
Yes. It's surveillance. It's fed by drones. It's fed by cameras. It's fed by IDF people walking up and down the street taking pictures. It's fed in a bunch of different ways, so they've got a complete picture of everybody. The Gospel, that's about people. The Gospel is about buildings. If they think they see insurgents going in and out of a building, they will bomb it. But the Gospel is its architecture is just about identifying suspicious buildings and then wiping them out. Now, the most diabolical one is called Where's Daddy? And it tracks everybody in Gaza, hundreds of thousands of people at a time. And when it identifies an insurgent, it doesn't kill them when they're out and about doing their insurgent things. It waits till they come home. When it crosses its threshold, it bombs the house. And it kills not just the family, but whatever other families are living nearby, in some cases, an apartment block. That's called Where's Daddy? And that's an obscene name generated by the IDF. So Daddy comes home and everybody dies.
So this perversely named technology, the idea is if say I were a target and you and I were recording together and I show up at your home, it might blow us all up.
No, if you show up at your home, now some of the things
when I get home to my family and things,
things that can indict you are hanging out with an insurgent, being in a chat group with an insurgent on WhatsApp can kill you. Going places where insurgents are known to go. There's no trial. It's all hearsay and innuendo. Sometimes they get a real live Hamas person. I don't know how they prove that, but they kill them all anyway. And they have so many targets that they don't vet them all. They don't check on them. They don't check them. So they basically let the machine do what it wants. And that means identify someone and bomb them or shoot them up with machine guns on drones. And this news is just getting out now. And this is, to me, it's important to me because it's AI.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always warned about using AI in warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And this blows the doors open on any other weapon system. This is like carpet bombing in an urban area without going under the name carpet bombing. But it's clearly genocide. It's always been the IDF's intention to kill people, not to bring them to trial or discourage them. I mean, there are many, many, many corpses of children with bullet wounds in their heads and chests, just targeted by IDF. And and as I said, there are 70,000 people were killed in the Gaza war till now, and the ceasefire is not working. 70,000. More than 20,000 were children. So what moral rationale can anyone possibly have to kill 20,000 children? It's incomprehensible. But it's an AI
But
issue.
possible with AI.
Yes, it's made possible by AI.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it fell into my bailiwick. And I'm proposing a book about it. And there's been kind of a hush over American media. And I'm not sure why. Because Israel has a massive and powerful lobby in America that discourages publishing about this. So that's why you don't know a lot about it, because they've stifled publishing. But now you'll know.
Yeah, and you touched on it in your newest book. What do you think is the bigger story for another book that's bigger than things like news articles that expose this?
I think it's interviewing people that have suffered by it, and it's interviewing former IDF members have come across to reporters in Israel and told the story.
Mm.
So that's the story.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the people that did it to talk. It's like interviewing Lieutenant Calley from Vietnam, from the My Lai massacre. The preponderance of evidence leaves no doubt that this is happening. Read these articles, and there are many, many more. It's shocking. I don't know why the world isn't talking about it. Well, some of the world is talking about it. They'll wind up at The Hague. These are war crimes.
So the bigger story then is the human beings who recognize this and want to get out of it after they've been a part of it.
I think the big story is that it's happening at all, that AI has been, we've crossed a Rubicon here.
Okay.
We've crossed a bad place where machines are killing people without a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
And not just killing people, but waging war. And that's a big distinction. We've had little automated cannons and AI cannons, but we've never had an entire multi-armed warfare system using AI before. And it just shows how powerful AI is. Now, the thing is, Israel makes its money by selling weapon systems. Here's another unbelievable part of this. They get people from around the world to come and watch them kill Gazans to sell the weaponry. Let me say that again. They get people to come around the world like Romans in a Colosseum to watch the Gazans die so they will buy the AI enhanced weapons.
They demonstrate it.
They
as you would a product.
Yep.
To sell.
And you because I mean, not just this year, but for many, many years, Israel has made its money from weaponry. And this is the icing on the cake. And a lot of American companies are collaborating with them. I said Palantir, Google, I believe Amazon, and some others. I don't want to name anymore because I'm not absolutely sure which ones, but I know not NVIDIA, but Palantir. Yeah, Palantir, Google, people with a lot of, they're using it, they're giving them cloud storage primarily. But that'll bleed into developing weapons. And mark my words, the wars of the future will be like this. We won't send any humans to war. We'll send lots of drones and we'll have the humans will be watching from Miami. We'll send a lot of drones, wave upon wave. We'll create giant databases of the enemy. We'll create virtual battlefields, and we'll know how the battle turns out before we wage it. AI is great at creating a model of virtual space and populating it with intelligent agents and then seeing how they fight against each other. So I'm sorry to hijack you.
Well, this is an important element, and it's something that stood out to me in reading your book as well. And I was an officer in the U.S. Navy, so I'm certainly
Oh,
concerned and interested with the way that warfare happens in the modern world. Anything else on these near term, real harm ethical issues?
well, we're all going to lose our jobs or part of our income. Just to recap, there's giant bias in the data, so it's just sort of inherently prejudiced. There's the biggest theft in the world going on right now because they're stealing copyright material.
Mm.
They're appropriating it and making another product and not paying us, not paying the writers or the artists or anybody that has any copyright material that they've got. The bias does real harm. Unemployment is going to be massive. And there's no real thought out retraining program for the unemployed. There are some pie in the sky ideas about universal basic income, but I don't trust any of them. First of all, the money they're proposing is too little. Second of all, they're totally disregarding the fact that we humans get meaning out of our work. I mean, and nobody more than blue collar workers. They get a lot of pride out of that. I get a lot of pride out of what I do. Writing is going to go away. I make documentary films. That will go away. Hopefully there'll be somebody, directing them for a while. People get identity and money and encouragement and affirmation from their jobs. It's not as simple as buying them off or trying to retrain them on jobs that will be taken by AI anyway. So that's all the bad news I've got. It's pretty bad.
To your point about copyright and things like that, so you said one of your books is being used. How do you know that, and what is that like?
Here's a shameless pitch for our final invention.
I've
I
got your
was
newest
not,
one here.
yes, and the newest one is there, the intelligence explosion. Thank you for getting that. I hope we sent one to you. But anyway, a group called Safety AI, who's one of whose headquarters in Amsterdam, got a list of the books that have been ingested. See, so there's giant amounts of books in the library, but then there's a curated bunch of books that they want in particular. And mine was on the curated list, our final invention. So for a while, I'm not sure you can still do it. For a while, I could go to ChatGPT and say, write a description of the Great Wall of China and do it in the style of James Barrat. And it would do it, stupid jokes and everything, which is okay for me because it's just kind of a novelty. But I know a woman in Amsterdam who creates album covers for bands, and she makes portraits of wealthy people. That business has gone away. The album covers, because anybody in a band can get on ChatGPT or another format or one of the more intensely graphic ones and make a really good album cover, really good. So she's out of business for that. She still makes high end portraits, but they're on the chopping block as well. So anybody who's got, and you can say, paint me the Great Wall in the style of I'll make up a name, Robin Zoolander, and it will do it. And why pay money to Robin Zoolander when you can just get it done for free? So I'm definitely the canary in the coal mine. A lot of crap's coming down the road, and we just we just need to be aware, and we need to be aggressive and not let the 10 tech bros running the world shove it down our throats.
So what are the solutions then?
I got slammed for not having any solutions in our final invention. I proposed some in the intelligence explosion. Most of them are kind of guardrails. Steve Alejandro and Max Tegmark got together and proposed a guardrail, which was about, I'd have to read it to tell you what it's about, but I have to read it from my book, but it's about making proofs that, when you make a contract on a blockchain, you can't break it. When you make a proof that something is safe, or it's not, you're never going to use this to make a weapon, and then you put it in the blockchain, and you can't break that rule. So they've got a blockchain-based security system. Ben Goertzel from Singularity AI and a lot of other companies, has got one that's also based on blockchain. That's very ingenious. But my one is regulation, and intelligent regulation, not the guys that Trump would pick out. Get people that really know their stuff, and get people that know their stuff in a variety of ways. Like get the technical guys, but also get the writers and speakers who can express what the concerns are and what the dangers are. Because, not all technologists are good writers, and few writers are good technologists. So they need everybody. They need someone to communicate their plans. They need to be a department of AI, and probably should be independent of the government, because we know how compromised the government can be. So
How would
the
regulation succeed? I mean, it seems that the trick with regulating technology is that the regulation is always behind.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to empower something like the IAEA. The International Atomic Energy Agency is a big consortium of many countries that all have agreed to play along, and they have people that go out and check to make sure that everyone's in compliance. And when something new comes up, they get on it. A new refined uranium. So the IAEA is a good example. We need that, but I would try to make it independent. Collect from the giant piles of money that tech guys are making, and make something like that, and keep it independent from them. I mean, our government has already been compromised by the tech brothers and by the politicians. So keep it away from them, make it completely independent. That could work. If everybody had a buy-in, somebody smart, it was probably Jan Tallinn or Max Tegmark, was saying to me, the Chinese don't want to die either. So when you say to them, can we collaborate as we get close to the intelligence explosion, and check on each other to make sure we're not going to destroy ourselves? And the Chinese, one thing they really like is to be the authority.
Yes.
In China. They don't want anybody else in China beating them to this. And they don't want us beating them to this. I think we will beat them to it. But I think that they would make a deal that we would do it together, and we take advantage of their brain trust and our brain trust, and we would try to create something that would be independent, objective, and protect everybody from the intelligence explosion.
It would be great to pull it off. I think some sort of collaboration with China.
It happened with nuclear fission.
Yeah. I've heard you speak about genetic engineering too, and the Asilomar conference and things like that.
Yeah.
And now in that field, we saw China doing gene editing of babies and things like that before everybody else was on board, when there was no medical need. Now that was a small group of people.
Yeah.
But we tenuous.
Currently in jail.
Yes, he is. Yes. But the tenuous relationship, but there's something there. At least it's something to try.
Yes. I mean, that's the only one. I don't see any of these other plans working. I see heavy duty regulations with bite. You've got to be able to punish people. If IAEA people get penalized. If you break the treaty, you get pushed out of the treaty organization. Mm-hmm. If you break it often enough. And then, the other thing is, fortunately, I mean, we tend to think of one genius in a basement making AGI, but that's probably not going to happen. As we've seen, it takes vast amounts of compute, vast amounts of storage, vast amounts of ever-changing, innovative algorithms. Not every country can do that. So fortunately, it'll probably come down to a handful of players.
James, Max Tegmark calls this a suicide race. Roman Yampolsky has said that we win by quitting. What hope is there for just stopping?
Well, we have relinquished technology before. But usually, as I love, Wendell Wallach is an ethicist at Yale. He's a brilliant man. And he said about automation, not AI, but about automation, he said, we're going to need some chastening accident. We're going to need to get slapped before we make moves. The trouble with a chastening accident with AI is it probably doesn't stop like a bomb, and then you clean up. It probably just goes on and on, especially if the AI is substantially smart and it can escape and get on the internet and spread itself around and be, unerasable. But I think we have a chance. I think when people understand the depth of the danger, and I think China does, and that's the people we really need to play ball with. And of course, there'll be some, we're going to win in the end thinking, but they know that nobody wins in the end if we don't solve the alignment problem before we create superintelligence or
I
even
think
AGI. Yeah,
it seems we've concluded that there's almost no chance of solving the alignment problem faster than building a super intelligent AI.
that's right. And isn't that ironic? It's like some part of us are trying to kill the planet. There's not kill, but are being so reckless they'll destroy the planet. And the other part of us are saying, please stop. Would propose a moratorium, stop developing until we understand it better. When we can understand what's going on inside generative AI. I mean,
As has been done with things like genetics.
yeah, once we understand it. I mean, that should be the base minimum requirement for dealing with the technology. What fools we have to be to deal with something we don't understand and then court it to the top of the inferno, to the top of the volcano. Here's the thing. There's no guarantee that we'll survive this technology. There's no God in the sky that's going to come down and save us from ourselves. This is kind of make or break.
Well, James Barrat, before we get to our last topic, for people who want to follow along and see where this is going with you, where should people look for you online?
JamesBarrat.com. James Barrat.
We'll put a link in the description for people to check out.
Thanks very much.
And James Barrat, my last topic, you brought up the movie The Matrix in your book. What do you think we could learn from The Matrix? What does it mean in culture?
I think it's a good allegory for what's happening now. Some people can be compromised by a good steak and some riches. Like that, the one character. Some people can't be compromised. I don't like the idea of using human bodies as batteries. That's very inefficient. That was a little bit unbelievable. But the rest was pretty profound because it talked about agentic AI agents becoming sentient. And I think that's down the road for us. And as in reality, they're not going to, without any guardrails, they will not be friendly to us. Obviously, the people in the Matrix did not solve the alignment problem. Since they were the humans who invented the agents, but they didn't put safeguards on it. So that's a good lesson for us. We have to control it before it controls us. It is sort of inherently uncontrollable when it promises to be thousands or millions of times more intelligent than we are. I mean, we don't know what to do with that. Just like my dog could keep me in the house for a while, but he'd get tired, he'd get bored after a while. I could sneak out. But with super intelligent AI, it's not going to be that easy.
Well, James Barrat, for doing the work to get that message out for your book, your newest one, The Intelligence Explosion, and for taking this interview, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brad. I really enjoyed it. The whole dialogue was wonderful. Thanks a lot.